And the Russian president says the Western sanctions on Moscow over the crisis in Ukraine cannot undermine Russia or change its policies. Vladimir Putin made the remarks in his annual speech to the nation. The Russian leader said it is meaningless for the West to talk forcefully to Russia. He added that Moscow still condemns what he called the coup in Ukraine last February. Putin also noted that the events in Ukraine showed Russia's policies in the neighboring country were correct. The Russian president also accused the West of interference in Ukraine's internal affairs and cynicism in their handling of the crisis there. He said the Western countries used the crisis as a pretext to impose sanctions against Russia. Let's speak to journalist and political commentator Fred Weir. He joins us via Skype from Moscow. Many thanks for joining us here on Press TV, sir. Now, many were watching Moscow's, Putin's address to the nation very closely, specifically in the context of the economic situation in Russia, with the ruble dropping its value against the dollar. But Putin seemed defiant as ever. What do you make of it?
Well, he certainly admitted that it's been a very bad year and that things will probably get worse. What he did was to define economics, social policy, other things that involve keeping Russia as a coherent, viable nation as national security problems. He sort of changed the dialogue in that way, saying that in order to survive, Russia needs to reform, to strengthen its economy, to use the mechanisms of import substitution to replace a lot of goods it formerly bought in the West, to become more self-sufficient, independent country. And this is, of course, what you said, defiance. I guess that's defiance, but it's also a rallying call. I think he wants to use the situation to propel Russia's economy, Russia's national defense, and Russia's sort of sense of national coherence, propel it forward.
Well, how do you think this is going to be interpreted in the West? As you know, let's not forget, Ukraine is still an ongoing issue. And according to the West, at least, all these sanctions and economic troubles that Russia is facing springs from that.
Well, first of all, it's not mostly sanctions that are hammering the Russian economy right now. It's the falling price of oil, which is the big thing, and structural problems that Mr. Putin certainly knows pre-existed, that Russian economists have been saying for some time, for 3 or 4 years, that Russia's economy needs major structural reforms. So I think he's using this situation to get a lot of things done. As for the West, I think that there is also an awareness dawning that Russia is too big a country to sanction to its knees. And in fact, the policy hasn't worked that well anywhere else, I guess. Cuba, after almost 6 decades, is still there of being embargoed. Iran, well, its economy may be suffering, it isn't surrendering. So the very policy of sanctions, even against smaller countries, haven't really delivered for the United States and its allies. So I think Putin also left the door open at several points in that speech to the West to do a rethink, to approach Russia in a different way.
And will that work?
I don't think so. I think that there is a sense in the West that Russia has become a bad actor, that it's a revisionist power out to change the terms of the global order, and that it either has to be isolated or it has to change its ways. I think that the lines are clearly drawn here. And Putin seemed to acknowledge that. He said that sanctions really weren't about Ukraine. They were a more comprehensive policy of containment. And that's probably got some truth in it, that the United States especially has decided that Russia has to be dealt with.
All right, we're going to have to wait and see how the U.S. Responds to this. Fred Weir, journalist and political commentator, joining us via Skype from Moscow. It's always a pleasure talking to you here on Press TV.